Meet the transfer class, Ohio State edition. This is the first one of this series we're doing. Cart, you, me, Brian Ralph, and Riley Davis ranked the top 21 transfer classes in the country. We were going to do top 20, and then I think it was Riley who had the genius idea to just do the top 21, so we could do 3 per day. So 20 top 20 transfers and one. Number 21, your Ohio State Buckeyes.
I'm surprised that you're referring to them as my Ohio State Buckeyes. I have never gotten this distinction.
You've gotten the distinction a bunch of times. This has been a tumultuous offseason for Ohio State, though, in the sense that they fired a coach that you like, they hired a coach that you don't like. But since the coach that you don't like has been hired, they've brought in a bunch of good talent, which speaks to them having an almost top 20 transfer class in the sport. Mei Johnson, former Ohio State Buckeye, turned South Carolina Gamecock, turned Ohio State Buckeye again, is back. Micah Parish, once a Michigan State target, is also an Ohio State Buckeye now. Shawn Stewart from Duke, five-star kid who didn't play much last year. And then Aaron Bradshaw, Kentucky, five-star kid who didn't play much last year. It's a star-studded class, some big names that maybe their name is bigger than their production. But in general, do you think this feels right that Ohio State is ranked 21st as the 21st best transfer class in the sport?
To be honest with you, I think it might earn the distinction of being a little bit higher because, look, this is where I'm at with this class kind of overall. I see it as like, I think the Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale thing, even though they'd only played 2 years together, had somewhat maybe run its course and they had to shift one way or the other, right? And I think, honestly, rightfully so, even being a Roddy Gale guy, I think they shifted to, okay, Bruce Thornton's going to be the guy. Let's go out and bring somebody else in to be with Bruce. Now, do I think that Michi is the right choice in the situation? No, honestly, I personally feel like Roddy Gale is a better player than Mei Johnson. But I think it might have just been like both parties were better, maybe moving on and maybe trying new things to see how it goes. And then they did a good job of upgrading their front court, in my opinion. Like you put together what they did with Bradshaw and Stewart coming in for a guy like Akpara, who I don't think took the steps that he needed to last season offensively, though he was good defensively. And then they bring in a guy like Micah Parish as well, who I think has been a part of a lot of winning teams. I believe he did play on that Final Four team for San Diego State, correct?
You did, yes.
Yeah, winning basketball player, I think does a lot of things that contribute to winning. So I really like what they did with this incoming transfer class. I think it deserves to be higher than 21.
I was just dying at the concept, the idea of like, yeah, we decided Roddy Gale just like too much of a redundancy to Bruce Thornton, shoot first guy. Like, let's bring somebody else in who is also an inefficient shoot first guy. But I hear you. Like, there's a lot of
But
big
you see
names
where I'm
on
coming from though. It's a change. Like I think Roddy Gale is a
this.
better player than Mei Johnson. It's just, I mean, there definitely might get to a point where we get to the middle of the season, like, oh yeah, we just exchanged another guy that's worse than Roddy Gale who goes against what Bruce Thornton does, and be like, everyone's gonna be shocked. But I'll be like, okay, we told you that a long, long time ago. But who knows? Like maybe it works and Jake Dealer pulls the right strings with it.
I think they're similar players for what it's worth. I think Michi's a better shot maker, maybe, but like they're similar in concept. Like they're both kind of combo guard types that can get you 14 points a game. Don't really do much else. Like I to me, Roddy Gale does more elsewhere other than scoring the basketball than Michi does, and
I'd agree.
Michi needs the ball in his hands more, which I think leaves Bruce in a weird spot. But anyways, this isn't the Mei Johnson, Bruce Thornton breakdown right now. We'll get to Mei later in the show. How this video is going to work, like I said, it's the first of 21 that we're rolling out 3 per day over the next week. I have some questions for you at the top. Then we're going to go through player by player, all 4 players in this class, kind of define who each one is with some projections, and then we'll end with some superlatives. For the record, I ranked this class 28th. So if I had my way, we would not be doing a video on the Ohio State transfer class. You ranked them 18th, and with a mix of Riley and Brian's rankings, we got them up to 21st. So let's start with number 1, Cart. Did Ohio State and Jake Diebler, did they do what they tried to do with these transfers? Yes or no?
I say yes. I think they did. I think that they broke up the pairing of Gale and Thornton, like I said, and then I think they upgraded in the front court. Now, do they maybe take some swings on some guys that are potential at this point? Yes, but they had a guy like Parra last season who was expected to take somewhat of a jump. And in my personal opinion, he did not take that jump, right? At least offensively, he did not. So I think moving on from that and maybe seeing and taking a swing on some high upside front court guys, along with Devin Royal, who they have coming back from the freshman class. But just speaking to what they wanted to do in the recruiting class, I think that they set out to break up that pairing while also bringing in maybe some upside front court swing. So I would say yes, in short.
I agree with you for the most part. They did what they were trying to do. They swapped out two guys that, in my opinion, Jake Diebler didn't believe in Felix Akpar and Roddy Gale. And they got back 4 players in theory that could start for this team. And we'll do some role assignment as we go player by player. But like Mei Johnson, Micah Parish, Shawn Stewart, Aaron Bradshaw, won't be surprised if any of those 4 end up starting for Ohio State this season. Okay, the second question I have at the top, what's one thing that they could have done better in assembling this transfer class?
Mm. The one thing I would say is that I like the front court upside swings, but the fact that they were in the final 2 for Trey Townsend, I think Trey Townsend would have been an incredible upgrade in the front court for this team.
Yeah, he'd just be a better player than any of the guys they got.
Right.
Here's my thing with both this transfer class and just Ohio State's roster in general. They need more shooters. Like that's what could they have done better? They could have gotten a stud shooter. Like you look at last year's team, Jamison Battle was such an integral part of it. He shot 43% from 3 on super high volume, but then you also lose Scotty Middleton, who was a 45% three-point shooter in lower volume off the bench. Like those guys are important. They project, or at least Scotty projected to be a big part of the future for Ohio State basketball. There isn't a player on this team that shot better than 33% from 3 last season, Cart. Like they have Bruce Thornton and Mei Johnson in the 30s. Every other player on this team was below 30% from 3. It's not even like great. They don't have shooters anywhere. And if you're going to play 2 bigs, like Micah Parish isn't a good shooter. Mahaffey and Royal were horrible from 3 last year. So I am concerned, but like when we get to actual projections for what does Ohio State basketball look like next year, there's like no shooting on this team. And that would scare me. And I think it was a missed opportunity in the transfer class. Like if you had brought in the 2 bigs and Mechie, or the 2 bigs and Parish, and then the 4th guy was like a stone cold sniper 3, I would like the class a lot more. It would feel a lot more balanced.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing is, like, yes, they on paper upgraded the 3-point shoot, but they upgraded the shooting, what, 3 percentage points? Like Roddy Gale's a 28% guy and Mechie's a 32% guy. And we have a large sample size of Mechie doing this too, right? It's not like, oh, maybe we project this guy to be a better shooter. I thought he played with some really good pass first point guards at South Carolina that could set him up to be like Talon Cooper was a guy who was a high assist guy. And we have a large sample size of 3 straight seasons on a varying number of attempts of him shooting 32%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gross. But hey, I mean, it could work. And a lot of rebounds to go around for the front court that is very talented of Shawn Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw. Okay, let's do meet the players. Meet the transfers for Ohio State. We'll go player by player. We'll each give our general thoughts on the player, maybe some stat projections. And then I also want to basically define each player. Is he a star? Is he a starter? Is he a role player? Or is he a non-factor on this Ohio State team? Your answer could be different than mine as we go player by player. We'll start with, I think, the biggest name on this list. It's Mei Johnson Jr. from South Carolina, back to Ohio State. He started his career at Ohio State. Clearly, Jake Diebler loves him. Clearly, he likes Jake Diebler if he was willing to come back. I also had no idea there's a junior at the end of Mei Johnson. Give me your general thoughts on Mechie, and then in that process, tell me, is he a star, starter, role player, non-factor?
So to me, Mechie is a guy who can score the basketball, but I don't necessarily ever think he's going to be an efficient guy, right? I think he's a type of like 6'2", not really a point guard, but he's also like not big enough to be a 2 guard. So he's a bit undersized, but he's a volume shooter. A guy who, if he can shoot like 41%, you're probably happy. Like you just accept that and maybe take his points for what they are. But I mean, I feel good saying that I would label him as a certified starter for this team, right? A starter for Ohio State, given the gap that Roddy Gale left with his departure. But I don't think that there is like the star potential or anything like that with Michi. I just think that he's kind of going to fill his role and be a guy who averages around 14 points a game on 40% shooting. I think that'd be a good year for Michi Johnson.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to consistency because if Michi plays to his ceiling, he's a star, I think. Like pretty
So
no nonsense. So
you think he has star potential?
yeah, like let me go through some game logs for Michi last year. So this was in November last season. Like this is his very first month with South Carolina's team last year. He had 24 points on 16 shots against DePaul. That was a night where he shot 1 for 7 from 3, by the way. But 24 points on 16 shots against DePaul in a win. 29 points against Notre Dame. He goes 4 for 9 from 3, 9 for 15 from the floor. 24 points against George Washington. 26 points on the road at Clemson. Goes 6 for 10 from 3. The Clemson team that made an Elite 8. So 4 of his first 8 games in a South Carolina uniform, he had 24 points or higher. Like, this guy has that in him. The problem is that when you got to conference play in the SEC last year, he had games of 6 points against Ole Miss, 6 points against Vanderbilt, 0 against Missouri, 0 against LSU, 3 against Auburn. Like, you can't be a go-to guy and go all the way off on that many nights, right? Like, you have to find a way to scratch and claw your way to 10 points a game. And I think that's the issue with Michi is I just don't know that that's ever who he will be. So for that reason, he needs to be a starter and not a star. But also, he's one of the higher upside starters, I think, in the league. And there is a world here where he becomes Ohio State's best guard to me. I know like we're pairing him with Bruce Thornton, but I think there's a world that Michi Johnson is like the leading scorer on this team. And maybe it asks Bruce to do less than he's done in the past. And that's a good thing.
I didn't know we were getting to the hottest take section early.
Well, there's a world. I didn't say that's necessarily a take, but
Okay.
Okay, so they got one starter in Michi Johnson. Let's go down the list. Who do you think is the next highest profile ad? I think I would say it's Aaron Bradshaw, probably.
I was gonna go Micah Parish, but I think I lean Bradshaw.
So let's say Aaron Bradshaw, 7-footer, center for Kentucky last season, 13 minutes a game, only 4.9 points, 3.3 rebounds, under 1 block. He was 57% from the floor, 28% from 3. Give me your general thoughts, and then is he a star, a starter, a role player, or a non-factor?
So my general thoughts of Bradshaw is that the potential is there, right? Like I think we saw it in spurts at Kentucky. We saw it in spurts in high school. I don't think he got his fair shake because I think he was a little bit hindered by that foot injury that he had coming into the year at Kentucky, and then had the whole thing with, I don't know, there's a lot of going on in the background between like clutch sports and Kentucky basketball and things like that. But the upside is there with Bradshaw. And to me, he's a starter. And if you're an Ohio State fan, I think the floor expectation for him should be like an Akpara level defender, but can also bring you something offensively. Like when Akpara caught it on the wing or caught it anywhere outside of 2 feet from the hoop, no one looked at him. No one even blinked at him, right? With Bradshaw, even shooting like a very low percentage of 28%, it was a guy you closed out on. It was a guy that had the willingness and the ability to shoot the ball and the willingness and ability to finish. But I think it's the big thing for him is that he needs to, I think, be stronger with the ball. He got pushed off a lot by a lot of smaller guys. But if you're an Ohio State fan, I think you upgraded your center position.
So you think he's better than Akpara?
I think he will be better than Akpara this year, yes.
I don't think that's the highest bar to eclipse, but I think I agree with you. I'd much rather have Aaron Bradshaw than Felix Akpara. I think I'm going to shock you, Cart. I think I'm going to shock you. I think Aaron Bradshaw is a star.
Ooh.
I think he's a star, not a starter. I think he's a star. I'll save the hot take for later, but this reminds me, completely different player, completely different position. This reminds me of when Michigan got Charles Matthews. And on paper, it was like, ooh, really, really flawed guy who didn't do anything in his first year, right? Mm-hmm. And then in reality, it was like, no, there were a lot of really good reasons for why Charles Matthews didn't do anything. Why don't we give him a chance and see what happens? Mm-hmm. And then pretty immediately, he was like plug and play one of the best players on the team that got really, really good really quickly for Michigan. That's what this feels like to me. You and I talked about this all the time last year. We covered Kentucky. I thought Bradshaw was like pretty clearly their best big, at least when he was healthy. And then things started to
Right.
fall apart. I think he's just a straight up better player than you got on Yenso. I thought he should have been playing more minutes. I think Zvonimir Visic's highs were really high, but he was such a disaster in a lot of different ways that you couldn't rely on him. Like I kept wanting Bradshaw to play a ton, and then down the stretch, he was basically just like out of the rotation entirely. He had a stretch from December into January to almost the end of January where he played in double figure minutes, 7 games. He scored in double figures 6 of those 7 games. He had 6 or more rebounds in 6 of those 7 games. Like, if you just play the guy, I think he's like a pretty safe bet to be like 12-6 at worst on a bad night. And his big nights are going to be bigger. Like, he had 17 and 11 in his second game in college with 3 blocks when he played 29 minutes. That was the most minutes he ever played the rest of the season, other than a 30-point game at Missouri, where, again, he was good. So I think Diebler is going to play him. I think it's one of those things where, like, you're not going to have to worry if he's on or off. He's just going to be the center every night. My one big question with Bradshaw is, can he stay out of foul trouble? Because even in very limited minutes last year, you go through, he had a bazillion games with 3 or 4 fouls. That's not good for a guy that only played 30 minutes once. It kind of is Terrace Reedy in that sense, where it's like,
Oh,
he came into foul, and you're like, well, can he ever stay out of foul trouble? It's like, well, he knew he could foul because he wasn't going to play a lot of minutes. It wasn't an issue for Terrace, is the point I'm trying to make. I don't think it will be an issue for Aaron Bradshaw, and I think Bradshaw's a lot more talented.
you were convincing me, but then you had to throw Terrace Reed possible outcome there at the end, and it really shook me to my core, I must say.
I know. I'm sorry. I think he's a star. Moving down the list, I guess we'll do Micah Parish next. Micah Parish, San Diego State in his 5th year, a 6'6" guard, 9 points a game, 4 rebounds a game, 1.9 assists, 39% from the floor, 29% from 3 last season. What do you think of him? And is he a starter, a role player, or what?
I think he's a role player. I think safely I'll say he's a role player. This is the thing with me though, and Micah Parish. I feel like Micah Parish gets kind of propped up as like this do everything guy and like great guy, which he does do a lot of things. But when you really come down to it and you look at like the percentages and like assist numbers and things like that, he doesn't really necessarily add knockdown shooting. He's not like a go-to scorer. I think he's good defensively. But you don't want Micah Parish, I think, and this is respectfully saying this, if you're on a really, really good basketball team, Micah Parish should be like your 7th guy, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about it. And I think that he's a role player and a good role player. That's what he should be for Ohio State.
And when you look at Ohio State's roster, right, Bruce and Michi are locked in. I think Bradshaw's locked in. And then the other 2 spots could go to Parrish, could go to Shawn Stewart, who we're going to talk about in a second. Evan Mahaffey started a lot of games last year, but we definitely want him to be replaced. Devin Royal's a guy you love. So, like, to me, it's like you got to pick 2 out of Micah Parish, Shawn Stewart, Evan Mahaffey, Devin Royal. Here's what I will say. I think I trust Micah Parish the most out of that group of 4. So I won't be surprised at all if he starts. But I'm going to say he's a role player and not a starter because I think in a perfect world, Ohio State's hoping other guys are good enough that you can use him like that. I think if you go through Micah Parish's seasons, he was a 6th man extraordinaire bench guy for the San Diego State team that went to the national title game. He started 1 out of 39 games, played 21 minutes. He shot better from 3. He shot better from pretty much everywhere. He was a better player that season, in my opinion. And then he rockets up 7 more minutes a game, starts all but 1 game this past season. San Diego State was a little bit worse, in my opinion. Okay, you're stretching him thin a little bit. That's what I think you have. You have a guy here, though, that is a great defender that I think if he's the 4th or 5th option offensively when he's on the floor can be good. I wish he was a better floor spacer, but he did have 3 straight seasons of 35% shooting from 3 before this last season where his numbers tanked. So I believe in Micah Parish's shooting ability. And if he is making threes, he'll be on the floor because of how few shooters the rest of the team has. But I think on paper, you're hoping he's a role player, maybe a 6th man extraordinaire. Back up Michi and Bruce Thornton, and God forbid Bruce or Michi miss games. You've got a guy who can start at the 1 or 2 and be really, really comfortable. Final guy from this class is Shawn Stewart from Duke. Probably the biggest wild card, I would say. Again, huge pedigree recruit. He's a forward, 6'9", 227 pounds. Is he a 4 to you? Like you could play him small ball 5, but probably a true 4.
Yeah, I would feel most comfortable with him at the 4, even at 6'9", just because of his crazy athleticism.
So he's a true 4 who has attempted 0 3-pointers in his career and shot 53% from the free throw line.
Yeah, he might be a damn near 5.
That's the hard part about playing him where he wants to play and needs to play, is like it doesn't help your team much if you're playing that guy at the 4. But he did have real games for Duke last season. I'll pull up the game logs here in just a minute, but when he got time near the end of the season, I remember kind of seeing some things that was like, oh, like, yeah, NC State, team that went to the Final Four on the road. He finishes with 12 points, 5 rebounds, played 26 minutes. That was the only game of the season he played more than 20 minutes. So I think the talent is there. What role do you see for Shawn Stewart?
So I'm a big Shawn Stewart guy, a big believer in him. I honestly was watching a lot of Duke games last year, and I found myself asking, like, maybe Shawn Stewart could get some minutes that Ryan Young gets on that Duke team. But I think that the pairing of Bradshaw and Stewart on paper should work if Stewart can be the floor space. I'm sorry, not Stewart. If Bradshaw can be the floor spacer. But yeah, at the same time, I'm very interested to see what Diebler does because, in my opinion, I'm a Devin Royal guy. I think Devin Royal should be your starting 4. That goes against what Stewart would be. Like, is Stewart going to be your backup center? Is he going to be the starting 4 and then Royal's off the bench? I don't know. I think honestly, Devin Royal is probably a better player than Shawn Stewart, I think. So I'm gonna go with I'm gonna say role player.
So you don't think he ends up starting? You think somebody overtakes him, and
I
it's
think
probably
Devin
Royal?
I think Devin Royal ends up starting.
You had Micah Parish role player too. Does that mean you think Mahaffey and Royal start? Because you got to pick 2 of those 4, I think, unless there's somebody random.
Can Micah Parish be a role player starter?
I don't think that's what the categories mean here, but I feel you. Like this feels like a thing that's going to be a revolving door, right? Like some guys will be in and out. He's not going to be like an every game starter. I will say this: I think our stack ranking of going like down the list of transfers is probably appropriate here. I think we ended with the guy that I am the most concerned about or most skeptical of, and it is partially fit, like you said. Like if he's with Bradshaw can be the floor spacer. That means you're taking Bradshaw away from where Bradshaw can be really good, though. And I just believe I want Bradshaw to get those chances where he's good more than I want Stewart to get those chances. I think that helps him more. The issue for me, especially as you project to the Big Ten, now that he's out of the ACC, it's like, think about the Big Ten 4s. There's a lot of teams that are going too big. So in theory, like spacing's not going to kill you. But can Shawn Stewart guard Malik Reneau? Can Shawn Stewart guard Danny Wolf? Can Shawn Stewart guard like even the teams that go too big? I think he's a liability defensively. And then like offensively, you would need him to be matched up on a littler guy to be able to really take advantage, I think. So he's kind of this tweener that's just kind of stuck in no man's land. If God forbid somebody gets hurt like in the front court and you need him to play a bunch of minutes, I think he'll be productive. But I don't think a good basketball team has him in a big role. And I think that's not to say he's going to play as little as he did at Duke last year, but that's my feel going into this year. It's better for Ohio State if Devin Royal or even Mahaffey or somebody else off the bench is good enough and Shawn Stewart can come off the bench. So I think he's a role player as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good call by you. The only thing with Stewart is that you can't deny like his pedigree and his talent. So it's just going to be interesting to see how Diebler navigates that, I guess.
Yeah, it's a test for him in year 1 for sure. Okay, want to end with a couple superlatives. Who's the best player this season? At the end of the year, we look back. Which guy from this group was the best for Ohio State?
I think I feel pretty safe in saying it's going to be Mei Johnson.
Okay. I'm going Aaron Bradshaw.
I can't believe you're going Aaron Bradshaw. The Michi little.
I think we're gonna. Part of that is Michi skepticism. Like, I don't think Michi's going to be awesome. I think he's going to be really inconsistent and it's going to hurt him. I think Aaron Bradshaw will be more consistent as long as he stays healthy. Who is the transfer that will improve the most from start to finish of this season for Ohio State?
I'm gonna go Aaron Bradshaw with that one. I think Aaron Bradshaw, the talent is there. I think the opportunity. I think what was missing most of Aaron Bradshaw was more so opportunity, whether that was his own fault or Kentucky's fault. I think given big minutes, he's going to be productive.
I feel exactly the same. I'm just saying Bradshaw for every answer, but I think you have to believe that if you think he's the best. Then give me the hottest take. Hottest take for this transfer class for Ohio State next season.
I'm gonna say that Aaron Bradshaw leads the Big Ten in blocks.
Whoa. All right. Mine was essentially Aaron Bradshaw is the best player on this team.
Best player.
Yeah, I think at the end of the year when we're ranking the best player on Ohio State, we're gonna put Bradshaw 1, other guards 2 and 3.
Can I push you to make this take even hotter? Because if he's the best player on Ohio State, are we not looking at like a first team All Big Ten big?
No, because I don't think Ohio State's very good.
Okay,
And
okay, all right.
I was
trying to push you to that point.
As we talk through this whole roster, with all due respect to the Buckeye fans that watch this, I think there's a lot of problems with it. Like there's just not enough shooting anywhere. I think Michi hurts Bruce Thornton more than he helps him. And yeah, I don't know. Like I really believe in Bradshaw to figure it out. I think he's going to have a lot of rebounding opportunities because there's a lot of guys who can't shoot super well on this team. And yeah, I think it might be another season where maybe you're outside looking into the NCAA tournament picture, but Aaron Bradshaw is really good and projects well for the future. There you have it. If you want the other 20 videos in this series, the best 20 transfer classes in the country, we're dropping 3 per day over the next week. The Ohio State Buckeyes are 21st. Thank you for watching. Car, you know what I love about you?
That I'm handsome?
You're reliable. I can count on you. You know, honestly, you remind me of Aaron Henry a little bit. Remember when, like, you know, their back was against the wall, nothing was going right, and man just showed up every day. He didn't make excuses. There were no problems. There were just solutions.
Sounds like me.
That's you. And it also reminds me of Duncan Mechanical Solutions, because if you're looking for quality furnace repair, look no further than the heating and air experts that you can trust. Comfort and quality are their standard. They're an HVAC company that serves Northeast Indiana and Southern Michigan, whether it's heating and air conditioning, plumbing, kitchen and bath remodeling, or emergency services when you need them most. Duncan Mechanical Solutions has reliable service that you can count on. Cart, remember when your basement almost exploded?
I remember when my basement almost exploded. I remember when my furnace itself was acting funny. I remember when my AC was acting funny. I wish I had Duncan in my back pocket. I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been anywhere in northern Indiana or southern Michigan that hasn't been perfectly cool or perfectly warm, depending on when the day called for. And that's because of Duncan Mechanical Solutions. They are the presenting sponsor for the month of July. Shout out to Duncan Mechanical Solutions. Go to duncanmechanicalsolutions.com to learn more.